Hi guys, this is Hirosaki. This story is all about what if Naruto was in Justice League. For decades, he had traveled from one corner of the known universe to the other, searching for a way back to his home planet. But after nearly 100 years of fruitless efforts, even with his legendary stubbornness, Naruto grew weary. Now, he had to let it go. Before we start, kindly like and subscribe to this channel, and look over the description box for the author of this amazing storyline. Welcome aboard. Chapter 32 Aftermath. Over 100 members of the Justice League were gathered at the Watchtower. The atmosphere, however, was vastly different from usual. There was no order and everyone was in the midst of arguing with others. You snapped someone's neck like a cold-blooded murderer. Someone shouted. It was a man wearing the attire of an English medieval knight. The center of everyone's attention was a tall and athletic woman with long black hair and blue eyes. Her white and gold armor was stained with still fresh blood, and her otherwise dignified and beautiful face bore the marks of a violent fight against a formidable opponent, seeing as there were bruises on her cheekbones and dried blood at the corner of her mouth. I did what I had to. If I was presented with that situation again, my choice would be the same. It was the life of a criminal for the life of countless innocent people. The woman replied. Who allowed you to be the judge, jury and executioner? We are the Justice League. We don't kill. Are you out of your goddamned mind? Superman screamed at her in anger. His blue and red suit was in tatters and his face was no less bloodied and hurt than that of Wonder Woman. Furthermore, although the sword wound in his stomach had closed up, his suit was still soaked with his own blood. You of all people should not talk about others being out of their mind, Superman. Green Arrow shouted back at him, unexpectedly speaking up to defend Wonder Woman. What nobody knew was that when he had first started his vigilante work, Green Arrow had murdered quite the number of criminals in Star City. It was only after he had cleaned up his yard and after gaining some notoriety that he had become low-key with his actions and started acting like the rest of the superheroes, sparing the criminals' lives. Fortunately, he had erased his traces very thoroughly after that, and the rest of the Justice League was not aware of his radical past deeds. It was out of my control. But she willingly murdered someone. Superman shouted back and stepped aggressively into Green Arrow's personal space. Though he had no superpowers, Green Arrow was not intimidated in the least. What? You're going to punch me to shut up? Or maybe kill me to keep quiet? Like you murdered hundreds of people in Metropolis a few years ago? Superman stepped back startled. No. I wasn't going to dash. Captain Atom intervened and said. That doesn't change what Wonder Woman had done. She had murdered someone in cold blood, perfectly aware of herself. What's even worse, the entire world had watched her do it. Pointing an accusatory finger at her, he declared, You will have to take responsibility for your deeds in front of the International Court of Justice. Captain Atom was an Air Force captain. Although he was a superhero, he was a part of the United States military too. He understood better than most how far-reaching were the consequences of Wonder Woman's actions. The U.S. government was just looking for an excuse to take drastic actions against the Justice League. The United Nations wanted to suppress them too because the Justice League had grown too powerful for their liking. Until then, the Justice League had never killed anyone, so the United Nations and NATO had their hands tied up. All the members used non-lethal means of apprehending the criminals and operated somewhat within the law's constraints. But the Amazon Princess actions changed that. Now, the United Nations had a legal ground to oppress, and maybe even force the Justice League to disband. Because of Captain Atom's words, the subject was diverted from Superman back to Wonder Woman. While some of the heroes tacitly agreed with what she had done, only Green Arrow had been brave enough to voice out his support to her. The rest kept their mouths shut. There were also a few like Supergirl and Starfire who adopted a neutral stance, choosing to stay on the sidelines and not get involved. But the vast majority of the members of the Justice League were very vocal in their jeers directed at Wonder Woman. It was in the midst of that chaos that a deep and demonic voice rang over the noise made by dozens of people's yells. "Shut up!" They had been so absorbed by screaming their heads off that no one had noticed a non-affiliated spaceship entering the watchtower. Now, they realized that two beings had all of a sudden snuck into their ranks. When they turned their heads and saw the giant nine-tailed demon fox and the masked man next to it, they immediately became silent. Though the original members of the Justice League were more concerned about Naruto due to their clash in Jump City, the rest of the members did not know about his true power. Instead, the rest were more scared by Kyuubi's strength. After all, they had all seen the video of a demon fox, as tall as Metropolis City's skyscrapers, defeating the Justice Lords from the other dimension. "Diana. Come here," the masked blonde man said calmly. In front of over 100 of her teammates and friends that were screaming at her and accusing her of being a murderer, Wonder Woman had kept her calm, showing them a composed and cold face. But when she saw that Naruto and Kyuubi had come for her, her suppressed emotions were about to burst. She almost ran to him, into his arms. "We're leaving," Naruto said simply to the others, and then turned around with Diana. "Hey, where do you think you're going?" Shazam shouted when he saw that Wonder Woman was going to leave just like that. He flew at a high speed, intent on blocking the door and cutting off their way, but a massive appendage, even thicker than his torso, was slammed into his body, and he was swatted away like a fly. He crashed into the metallic outer wall of the watchtower with a bang, leaving a human-shaped dent in it. Dark laughter came from the fox when he saw the muscular hero barely pulling himself up to his feet. "I haven't killed someone in ages. Who wants to be first? I'll be more than happy to oblige." There were almost 150 metahumans present there, but none of them dared to step forth. Shazam was one of the most durable and physically strongest members of the Justice League, almost on par with Superman. If he was smacked back that easily, it stood to reason that most of them would turn into a smear of blood by the demons' tails. "That's what I thought." "Trash," Kyuubi said mockingly. He was goading them to attack him. "Don't provoke them, Kurama. We're not here to fight," Naruto said. "Speak for yourself." "I'm itching to see some blood." The fox growled at him. "You're itching for a beating." The two of them bickering like they were not giving 2 cents about the large group of metahumans behind them was almost like a slap for the superheroes there. Unable to stand the humiliation, Superman shouted. "Don't think you'll be able to protect her forever, Uzumaki. What she has done will not go unpunished." Naruto let go of Wonder Woman's hand and turned around. "She just hooped your ass and left you half dead after stabbing you with her sword. Does she look like someone who needs to be protected?" he said and looked at him in ridicule. Martian Manhunter, who had been mostly silent until then, spoke at that moment. "We're not talking about harming her. But Wonder Woman committed a taboo. If she wants to continue working as a member of the Justice League, she has to be held accountable for her actions. She will have to take responsibility and be trailed by the International Court of Justice." Naruto snorted at his words. "You think I'd let her be part of this charade after this?" "Naruto." Wonder Woman tried to make him stop, but he said categorically, "No, Diana. You just fought with your life on the line to subdue a Kryptonian who was trying to kill you. They are your teammates and your friends, but instead of supporting you, they're the first to denounce you. Some friends they are, kicking you down at the drop of a hat. With friends like these, you're better off living among enemies." Then he told the Justice League. "Even if she were somehow acquitted by the sheep living on this planet, I wouldn't let her be part of this organization of imbeciles anymore. You people do not deserve her." Back to Wonder Woman's apartment in New York, Naruto opened the door for her and followed her inside. They stopped in the living room and she let herself fall on the sofa heavily. He sat down with her and started to examine her face. "He beat you up so badly. You're hurt." "You should have seen his face," she said, chuckling weakly. He did not laugh. Bringing his hand up to her face, he caressed her bruised cheek with his thumb gently, to make sure he was not causing her pain. A cyan light started to glow around his hand and healing chakra started to seep into her skin, speeding up her regeneration. Diana closed her eyes and let out a sound of comfort at the warm energy infiltrating her body. The bloodlust Kryptonian had almost killed her when he punched her from the outer space into the planet like a meteorite. Then, he reshaped a portion of the Andes Mountains with how he repeatedly smashed her into mountains, almost leveling some of them in the process. While Goddess Demeter's blessing had allowed her to draw energy from the earth and heal her most serious wounds, her entire body was one big bruise. Everything hurt. Why didn't you summon me? I could have teleported to your side in an instant. You wouldn't have been hurt like that. He said. You said it yourself, I'm not a damsel in distress. I don't need someone's protection. I am a warrior. Naruto frowned in annoyance. He knew how proud the Amazon princess was. Besides, I didn't have your dagger with me. It was 5 a.m. when John woke me up and I left in a hurry. I forgot to take it with me. Diana mumbled in a low voice. I told you to keep it on you at all times, didn't I? What if something worse happened? He scolded her. When Wonder Woman looked to the side stubbornly, he dropped his shoulders and gave up. He did not want to nag her too much at that moment. But he was going to make sure they would talk about it again soon. He fiddled with the clasp holding her white cloak and untied it before taking it off. He also took off her golden tiara from her forehead and her golden wing ornaments framing her face too. After that, he untied the clasps of her golden pauldrons, revealing her bare shoulders. Standing up from the sofa, he took off her high-heeled golden greaves, leaving her barefooted. When his arms came behind her knees and around her back, she said with a stammer. What are you doing? She was starting to grow embarrassed when she realized that he had undressed her, and now he was carrying her in his arms. SHH. Let me take care of you. He shushed her and headed to the bathroom with her in his arms. When they entered, the princess saw that the bathtub was already filled with hot water. A shadow clone had prepared the bath for her before dispelling itself. He let her down in front of the bathtub. Objectively, at that moment, Wonder Woman's appearance left much to be desired. A bruised and bloodied face, shaggy hair filled with dirt, she was stinking of sweat and her previously white clothes looked gray, stained with mud and blood. However, in Naruto's eyes, even in that deplorable state, Diana looked beautiful. When he saw her shy and embarrassed expression, he could not contain his feelings of love for her. Though he had just let her go, he brought her once again in his embrace. If you hadn't already beaten the crap out of Superman yourself, I would have ripped him to shreds. He said and hugged her dearly. She did not push him away. But when she felt his hands starting to pull at the back of her white and golden top, she looked up at him startled. Baby, I don't think I'm ready for this. She said. He had lost count of how many times she had acted provocatively over the past weeks, trying to seduce him. But now, she was acting like a scaredy cat. Nonetheless, he was not having indecent thoughts in mind at that moment. Relax. I won't do anything like that. But I could stay and help you wash if you wanted. He said, grinning. Her meek reaction was poking at his inner sadistic side. He felt the urge to push her down and tease her, but he held himself back. Everything had a time and a place. Now, she was wounded. Other things were more important. Kissing her forehead, he added, have a shower. Soak in the bath. I'll wait for you outside, okay? Hums of comfort and pleasure were coming from Diana as Naruto worked his magic on her. Channeling the mystic palm technique, he was infusing her tired and bruised body with his chakra. A cloak of yellow-red light appeared around him, and when he placed his hands on her back again, the princess shivered. Then, her bruises started to disappear at a speed visible to the naked eye. Naruto's yang chakra had a very powerful rejuvenating attribute. Coupled with her already excellent constitution as an Amazon and a Zeus daughter, she was healed in a matter of seconds. Even her tiredness disappeared. Though she was completely fine now and she no longer required his assistance, he did not stop. He started to massage her. He gently caressed the back of her neck and slightly pushed with his thumbs on her trapezius muscles. They were more defined compared to other women and her shoulders were wider too. He took his time massaging her stiff and sore muscles and secretly smiled to himself. When his index finger traced her spine, she made a cute sound and her back involuntarily arched. As his hands traveled further down her back, he heard her breathing quickening in anticipation. But he purposely did not touch her glutes, caressing her hips instead. She started to subtly squirm when his hands touched her inner thighs, very close up to the towel covering her below the waist. "I can't massage you properly if you don't relax your muscles." She was on her stomach and could not see his face, but she could hear the smile in his voice. "How can I relax when you touch me like that? Pervert. You're the one who's been perving on me all this time. How does it feel to have the tables turned on you for once?" he said and chuckled. But he stopped teasing her after that and started to really massage her legs seriously. From her strong and meaty thighs to her sculpted calves and her surprisingly dainty feet. She started to groan in comfort again when he began to massage the soles of her feet. "Yes, there," she almost moaned. "That's what you get for fighting crime and monsters while wearing high heels," he said. "If getting a massage from you is the price, I won't stop fighting in heels anytime soon," she said, giggling, but she let out a squeak when he unexpectedly smacked her butt. Being pampered and spoiled like that, Diana momentarily forgot about the pandemonium in the outside world at that moment. Other people saw her as a stoic warrior and more recently a brutal and cold-blooded murderer, but when she was with him, behind closed doors, she transformed into an ordinary woman, a woman whose heart fluttered whenever the man she loved showered her with his affection. When he was done massaging and teasing her, they cuddled together in bed. It was barely noon and the world at large was on fire, with the mass media fanning the flames even harder, but they were disconnected from everything else. Now, they were watching a movie Home Alone. Christmas was just around the corner and many television channels started streaming the traditional Christmas movies. "This house is so full of people, it makes me sick. When I'm growing up and getting married, I'm living alone. Did you hear me?" They chuckled at that particular line. "It's chaotic, but I wish I grew up in a home like that," Naruto said wistfully. "Our future kids," Diana began to say, but she dressed her voice and stopped. "Do continue, please," Naruto said, smiling from one ear to another at her slip of the tongue. Luckily for her, she was saved by the bell. Just at that moment, the doorbell rang. "I'll go," she said and quickly jumped out of the bed, rushing out before Naruto could open his mouth. He was still chuckling to himself when Diana's startled cry reached his sensitive ears. "Hermes? What are you doing here?" The fluffy and feel-good mood from before vanished. An arc of yellow-red light was left in his wake as he teleported out of the bedroom. An instant later, his body appeared right in front of Diana, in the doorway. A cloak of yellow-red chakra enveloped him as he entered directly into his bijou mode, and a flaming Rasengan took shape in his hand in the blink of an eye. Chapter 33 Decree. After they took Wonder Woman from the Watchtower and returned to her apartment in New York, QB thought it would be good to let the two of them spend some time alone, as a couple, and decided to go visit Dr. Fate and ask for his advice. Therefore, while Naruto was healing up Diana's bruised and battered body, QB landed with his and Naruto's spaceship at the outskirts of Salem, Massachusetts, in the woods, next to a stone tower. It was a rather comical image when the large trapdoor of the spaceship opened, but only a tiny nine-tailed fox cub stepped out of it. After doing 2 rounds, walking around the tower, and seeing no entrance, QB lost his patience and yelled, "Fate! Oi, sorcerer!" Shortly after the fox started hollering, a door of light in the shape of an ankh appeared in one of the stone walls of the tower, and a rather good-looking woman looking like she was in her 30s came out. It was Inza, Dr. Fate's wife. Is Dr. Fate here? That's the address Naruto gave me. The previous time when Naruto visited the sorcerer, it was only him and Wonder Woman. Kyuubi had been away, wandering on his own for several days. Now it was the first time he was seeing Dr. Fate's home. Inza looked at the fox cub in curiosity. It was the first time she was seeing Kyuubi face to face. The nine-tailed demon fox was actually very infamous among the metahumans of Earth, much better known than Naruto, of whom most people thought of as just Wonder Woman's boyfriend. In contrast, the Bijou was famous for how he curb-stomped the Justice Lords of the other dimension because it was seemingly his enormous size and his fire breath attack that defeated them. Seeing the woman looking at him silently, Kyuubi said, "I'm not going to attack him or anything like that. Fate knows me, we've met very often while he was curing Naruto's petrification. I have some questions that he may know the answer to." "Let him in, Inza, he means no harm." She heard her husband's voice in her mind. "Very well then. Follow me," she told Kyuubi and turned around. An arc of yellow-red light was left in his wake as he teleported out of the bedroom. An instant later, his body appeared right in front of Wonder Woman, in the doorway. A cloak of yellow-red chakra enveloped him as he entered directly into his Bijou mode, and a flaming Rasengan took shape in his hand in the blink of an eye. But his target evaded his Rasengan like a phantom. "Naruto!" Diana cried out to stop him. Naturally, he was aware of his surroundings too. Though he missed his target, just as his flaming Rasengan was about to impact the floor, the sphere of fire was abruptly extinguished, disappearing into the palm of his hand. If he had not cancelled his technique, the top half of the skyscraper would have been blasted to smithereens, causing an untold number of casualties. But he held back, because he did not want to endanger innocent bystanders. Nonetheless, their uninvited guest kept his distance with a wary look on his face. He had definitely taken notice of how powerful that attack was, gaining a healthy dose of respect for such destructive magic. "That's a rude way to greet someone," the Olympian god said eventually and patted off the non-existent dust on his clothes. "So this is the man my sister fancies? I must say this isn't a very good first impression." Hermes looked like a handsome and well-built man in his late 20s. His attire consisted of an off-shoulder white robe, a winged and open-faced golden helmet, golden greaves on his feet, and a wide beige belt around his waist. Hanging from his other shoulder was a rather large pouch filled to the brim with scrolls. All in all, his appearance was exactly how a mortal would imagine the herald of gods to look like. "Why are you here, Hermes? Has anything happened?" Wonder Woman asked as she stepped forth from behind Naruto's back. Whenever the Amazon princess had met one of the Olympian gods in the past, she had greeted them with a deep bow and respectful words. But, ever since her mother revealed the truth of her origins to her, she had lost her reverence to the gods. Nonetheless, Hermes was one of the gods that she still respected. "I found out after thousands of years that I have a sister. Do I need a reason to come and see her?" Hermes joked and approached them. But he stopped to 6 feet in front of them when he saw Naruto prepare another sphere of magic in his hand, this time filled with lightning. The god dropped his shoulders in helplessness. "I don't know what you heard about the gods, but we're not all trying to kill Diana, you know?" Hermes said to Naruto, and then he turned his attention to Wonder Woman. "We all felt your divinity earlier this morning. Now the entire Olympus is aware of your existence. And Hera, she is not happy, to say the least. When I left, the skies were shaking from her screams at Zeus. Zeus himself is not pleased with the situation either. Apparently, you weren't supposed to learn about your true heritage." Hermes continued to say, but the Amazon cut him off and actually shouted at him. "How is any of that my fault? He's the one who cheated on his wife. He's the one who raped my mother. Why should I care that he's not happy? For all I care, he should burn in the flames of Tartarus for eternity." Momentarily, Hermes was stunned. Had it been in the past when the Olympian gods still roamed the earth, Zeus' lightning would have struck Wonder Woman down for her blasphemy. Zeus is the king of gods for a reason. He said seriously. Many have tried to dethrone him before, but none of them has ever succeeded. Do you know why? Because of his power. And might makes right. I came here today not just to see you. I also have a message from him too. Then, he started to rummage through the scrolls in his pouch, looking for the right one. After a while, with an aha sound, he found it. He tossed it to Diana, but it was Naruto the one who snatched it before it could reach her. He was not taking any chances. For all he knew, that scroll could be a trap. Wonder Woman glared at him for how overprotective he was being, but he paid it no mind. Better safe than sorry, he thought. Unfurling the scroll, he tried to read it, only to realize that he could not understand the language. It was ancient Greek. Furthermore, his translating device could not translate texts. Awkwardness ensued. Give it to me, Diana said in exasperation, not knowing whether to laugh or to cry at his antics. Then, she started reading it out loud in English. By decree of Zeus, father of Olympus, it is so ordered, Diana of Themyscira will travel to Tartarus and prove her loyalty by executing the traitor, Hades, and presenting his head to Olympus, in front of the gods. Turning towards Hermes, she said. So you're telling me to go to hell? Hermes shrugged his shoulders uncaringly. Hey, I'm just the messenger, don't get angry at me. Diana tossed the scroll back to him. If they want to kill someone, they should do it themselves. I'm not anyone's henchman. Why should I care? You mean other than the direct order from the gods? Hermes replied. I've been exiled from Themyscira. I'm no longer serving the gods. Seeing her unimpressed and indifferent face, the god said. Then maybe do it for the sake of your mother and your Amazon sisters? You dare threaten Wonder Woman started to say angrily, but Hermes quickly raised his hands to stop her from blowing up at him. Hold up. They haven't said anything about it yet. But you should know the myths very well. While not all of them are true, most of them are not too far off. If you defy the gods, maybe you and your he made a pause to find the right words. Violent boyfriend over here are strong enough to survive the repercussions. But what about your friends and the other people close to you? Specifically, what would you do if they decided to take their anger on your mother and the rest of the Amazons? Unlike most of the other Olympian gods, who had shut themselves off from the world and ignored the mortals in the lower plane of existence, Hermes and Athena were completely the opposite. In particular, as the god of commerce and thieves, very few other beings were as informed as Hermes was in regards to events that transpired not only on Earth, but in the rest of the known universe too. He knew that Diana's violent boyfriend annihilated a race together with his demonic fox, so he did not underestimate him despite that he was just a mortal. Seeing Wonder Woman falling silent, Hermes added. This is an order from Zeus. You have to obey it. Though many years have passed, Zeus is still vigilant against the Titans and fears a potential uprising. Given your strength as a demigoddess and his mistreatment of your mother in the past, Zeus wants to make sure there won't be a repeat of what happened when Hades betrayed them. But if I were to give you a piece of advice when you go to Tartarus, make sure you come back. I'd hate to see my new sister perish just like that. What's that supposed to mean? Naruto asked with narrowed eyes. Putting aside the danger Hades himself poses, and the dangers of fighting against the creatures of Tartarus, the fact is that the eyes of the gods can't see past the gates of Tartarus, into Hades' domain. Wouldn't that be the perfect place for Hera to take action? Naruto completed his words. Hermes nodded at him. Exactly. Now then, I would love to sit and chat more, but I have completed my task, so I shall not dilly-dally anymore. Time is money. You take care of yourself, dear sister. Hermes said and waved his hand in goodbye before he vanished. As the saying goes, when it rains, it pours. That's what Wonder Woman was feeling at that moment. It was as though she was in the middle of an agitated sea, waves after waves were coming and the storm seemed unending. "What do you want to do, Diana?" Naruto asked quietly. The princess was sitting on the sofa, with her elbows on her knees and her face buried in her palms. "I'll have to follow his orders," she said in a defeated voice. "You don't have to do anything you do not want to. No one can force you to do anything. If nothing else, nobody will be able to harm you, your mother, or the Amazons as long as I'm standing here." Diana shook her head. "You don't understand. The gods don't need to act against them. They don't need to do anything. One simple thought of theirs is enough to snuff the life out of everyone." Naruto looked at her in doubt. He had battled against a goddess before, and he had learned quite a few things over the years about the gods of New Genesis and Apocalypse too. None of them was capable of simply erasing people from existence with just a thought. He believed she was exaggerating. As if to prove his thoughts wrong, she continued. "Nowadays, the Amazons exist for the sole purpose of guarding the gates of Tartarus. But do you know how the Amazons came to be? How were they created?" He did not know what to say. "They are women who had died at the hands of men in their previous lives. The gods created bodies for them, sculpted from clay, gave them life, and blessed them with superhuman abilities. The gods don't need to attack, and we can't do anything to protect them because if the gods just retrieve their blessings, the Amazons will simply die, reverting to clay. Their very existence depends on the gods. For thousands of years, I thought I was one of them too. That's the reason for my blind faith in the gods. That's also why the world came crashing down on me when I learned the truth." A grave expression appeared on Naruto's face and he frowned. "This whole situation is so twisted," he said. "There was nothing the Wonder Woman could do to protect the Amazons if the gods decided to take action against them. And even if she and Naruto had the power to kill the gods, they could not do that either because the Amazons would die after that too. Wonder Woman really had no other choice but to obey Zeus' decree." It was barely 2 hours after her injured and bruised body recovered that Wonder Woman started putting back her armor, preparing herself to go to battle again. A white and gold armor top, white skirts, golden over-knee greaves, golden pauldrons, and a white cloak covering her back and protecting her neck. She put her golden tiara back on her forehead, and the protective wing ornaments framing her face too before she finally strapped her sword and her golden shield on her back. She was not the only one getting ready. Similarly, Naruto also changed from his gray sweatpants and blue t-shirt into his black combat suit and his fur-collared black cloak. Diana came in front of him, and her blue eyes looked at his slit, red ones. Despite their fierce and demonic appearance, to her, his eyes spoke volumes of his feelings for her. "Ever since we started living together, I've only brought problems at home and now, I'm even dragging you with me to hell. I'm sorry." That was not how she had imagined her winter holidays to be this year. She had expected the most beautiful end of the year in her very long life, spending her time together with the man she loved. She had wanted to go shopping together with him, and even try to cook something together as a couple, in spite of her previous disastrous attempt. She had wanted to decorate the Christmas tree together with him, to go on walks and watch the Christmas lights on Christmas Eve and spend many more romantic moments with him. She had also been planning and hoping for them to have their first time together very soon and progress with their relationship to the next level, but nothing seemed to go her way. Her superhero work was eating up most of her time every day, and misfortune and new troubles popped up one after another. Her dreams turned out to be vastly different from reality. Involuntarily, her eyes became wet from frustration. Letting out a shaky breath, she came to him and hugged him silently. "It's okay. You don't need to say anything else," he told her and gently caressed the back of her head. They stood like that, hugging for a few moments. Diana had an expression of unwillingness on her face when they parted and, despite the somber mood, Naruto found himself smiling softly at her. "To think that I would hold such a special place in someone's heart one day. Who would have thought?" He could see how much his presence meant for Diana. Until then, besides Kyubi, who had always been by his side, he could not think of many people that had really cared about him as a person. Even the old man and Ero Sennin cared for me only because I was Kurama's Jinchuriki, or the child of the prophecy. Naruto thought. Maybe Irika cared for me? But then again, it's only after I graduated that we got closer, and even then, we rarely ever spent any time together. Looking back at his childhood and his teen years, Naruto was beginning to realize just how lonely and starved for affection he had been until he met Diana. Objectively, his childhood and his teenage years had been like hell, mostly alone, ostracized, and abused even by his own teammates, to say nothing about the rest of the people in his village. After that, he was hunted like an animal and spent years on the run from a terrorist organization. Lastly, he ended up participating at the mere age of 16 in an apocalyptic world war. Spending almost a century single-mindedly looking for a way to return to such a terrible place only served to prove how damaged he was as a person. But now that he was living in the bliss that came from being loved by someone and realized how sweet life could be, it was as if a veil was lifted from his eyes, and he could finally see the unbiased truth in regards to his homeworld. Now, I wouldn't go back even if I could. Not without Diana. When he arrived at that conclusion in his mind, the feelings he held for the Amazon princess started burning even harder in his heart. He was unable to bear with the sudden urge of wanting to hold her. And he did just that. He embraced her again, his arms wrapping tightly around her back. I love you, Diana. I love you so much. He was speaking from the depths of his heart, and Diana herself sensed that. She cupped his scarred cheeks in her hands, and then took his breath away with a kiss. Her arms came to embrace his neck, and she pressed the back of his head to deepen their kiss even more. Their tongues met in a dance of love and passion, and they lost themselves in the other's sweetness. When they parted, they rested their foreheads on each other, their faces flushed and gasping for air. Still hugging, they continued to steal small pecks and quick kisses, unwilling to let that moment of passion end. She was being forced to go to hell, where she would most likely be assassinated, and she had to fight against a god and kill it too. If that was not enough, except for Green Arrow, who had stood up for her, everyone else, all her friends turned their backs against her. Even her oldest friends, Batman and Superman, men that she had respected a lot, were condemning her and wanted nothing to do with her. Now, the entire world hated Wonder Woman. A murderer. But, as she lay in Naruto's arms, she thought, it doesn't matter. At that moment, she felt that even her friend's betrayal meant nothing as long as he loved her. Chapter 34 Faith. Vanilla biscuits and green tea were being served in the living room of Dr. Fate's tower, but, unlike his usual self, the gluttonous fox felt no desire to stuff himself full with the food placed on the coffee table in front of him. Instead, his slit crimson-red eyes were staring intently in the gray eyes of the old sorcerer, and his negative emotion-sensing ability was focused on him too. Though he had played off Naruto and Wonder Woman's worries in regards to him, Kyubi himself was more concerned than anyone about the things happening to him. How do I make the voices stop? How can I end this? Kyubi asked after he finished telling Dr. Fate about his problem. His fluffy nine tails were unconsciously flicking in distress. Kent Nelson looked like he was hesitating, mulling over what answer to give him. You can't. A low growl came from the fox. What are you hiding from me, sorcerer? Kyubi asked dangerously. The fur on the back of his neck stood up like needles. Dr. Fate's expression changed. For all intents and purposes, the demon fox across the table in front of him was like a ticking bomb. He decided it was not wise to test his patience. I am not lying. You can't stop it. Not by yourself. The sorcerer said. To put it simply, the power of faith is pushing you to become a god. Whatever Kyubi had expected Dr. Fate to say, it was definitely not that. The power of what now? From angry and frustrated, Kyubi had become speechless. Kent Nelson explained. While I was curing Mr. Uzumaki's petrification a few months ago, we had a rather interesting conversation. From what he told me, hundreds of millions, if not billions of people in the Vegas system had celebrated the annihilation of the Psion race. He said that some of the more extreme and zealous people there even started to create cults dedicated to worshipping the being that had brought them salvation, the being that had freed them from their tyrants. To worship you. The silence that followed was almost deafening. In all honesty, back then, I just brushed those words aside, not paying them any attention. I thought he was exaggerating in an effort to justify his deeds. With the knowledge and wisdom of Nabu, Dr. Fate could see what lay beyond the physical realm. He could sense the power of faith converging into the fox cub's tiny body, and that there was an enormous amount of it. The voices tormenting your mind are nothing but the voices of the people that put their faith in you. They are praying to you. For them, you are their god. But since you obviously not a god, things aren't going well for you. Naturally, something like this would not have happened if there was just a small number of people praying. But when there are hundreds of millions or billions of people, the psychic energy generated by their will and their faith is not something that can be easily ignored. QB was floored by the revelations. How do I make it stop? He asked urgently. I can't go on like this. Over the past few weeks, I forced myself to sleep because the voices would quiet down then. But even that doesn't work anymore. I have to stop it. The fox was growing desperate as he realized the actual magnitude of what was happening. You only have two options, Dr. Fate said and showed two fingers. One, to break those people's faith in you. But after what you did for them, I can't imagine a scenario where the people of Vegas system would start to resent you unless you started committing some unthinkable atrocities against them. The Bijou may have been an avid enthusiast of battling and violence, but he was not a mindless beast that enjoyed slaughtering innocents. He eliminated that option from his mind right away. 2. Become a god. But that is impossible. Before QB could say anything, Dr. Fate asked him a question. You've ever wondered what are the gods? How are they any different from other metahumans? It's not like they are the only beings in the universe with superhuman powers or the ability to not die of old age. There are countless other beings with superpowers out there. In that case, what makes someone a god? QB and Naruto had traveled the universe for nearly a century, but that did not mean they were all-knowing. There were plenty of things that they were still clueless about. In particular, the things Dr. Fate was talking about had never even crossed the fox's mind before. Outwardly, one would think that gods are no different than other metahumans. But what is different at them is their essence, the essence of divinity, the energy of the source and the presence. It is an energy coming from the Creator, the one true God. That is what gives the gods their power, their immortality, their right to call themselves gods. The fox listened to his words with rapt attention. He instinctually understood that that was a piece of information that extremely few beings in the entire universe were privy to. Kent Nelson was among those extremely few enlightened beings, because he was the owner of the helmet of fate and possessed the wisdom and the knowledge of Nabu, a lord of order. Dr. Fate continued. The power of faith amplifies a god's power. The psychic energy they assimilate from the people that worship them can increase their strength several times over. But the power of faith itself cannot create a god. The only ways for a new god to appear in this world are either to be given birth by a god, or for a mortal to usurp a god's divinity. But how many mortals can stand up against a god, to say nothing about killing them? And even if you are powerful enough to do so, how would you find a god? Gods live in a different dimension from our own, in another plane of existence. The sphere of the gods. Mortals have no way of accessing their realm. Do you understand now why I said you can't? Dr. Fate was not an expert at reading emotions on a fox's face, but the grin that appeared on QB's face left no doubts that he was in a great mood. Instead of being deflated or angry by the seemingly impossible task ahead of him, QB was excited. For months, ever since he and Naruto destroyed the Psions, he had been plagued by the voices in his head. It was something that had gotten increasingly worse with every passing week. There were moments when he was seriously considering the possibility that maybe he was going insane. But now, he finally learned of a way to solve his problems. "Come on, D. We have to go," Naruto said and broke their hug. Wonder Woman let out a small sigh. Naruto's offer from a few months ago to leave the Earth behind and tag along with him and Kyuubi on their adventures seemed more tempting every day. Though she was a woman that did not run from responsibilities, it was different when all her efforts were being spat on. She locked the door of her apartment and then the two of them climbed the staircase to the rooftop of the skyscraper. It was a short flight of stairs because her apartment was already located on the top floor of the building. Clad in their respective armor suits and equipped with their battle gear, they were going to take flight from the rooftop of the building. "Are we going to Salem first?" she asked as she approached the edge of the rooftop. "Yes, we have to take Kurama with us too," Naruto said and followed her towards the edge. However, when he looked at the scenery below, his expression darkened. The avenues and streets of New York had become an ocean of people. Despite the cold and snowy weather outside, it was past the middle of December, tens of thousands of people were marching together, their screams covering any other sounds in the city. What they were screaming could not be understood completely because they were not coordinated, but it was not difficult to guess what they were saying. After all, Wonder Woman had killed Maxwell Lord 4 only a few hours earlier that day, and the AI named Brother I had streamed the act for the entire world to see it. A few currents of air started to circle around Naruto, and his feet left the rooftop of the building. He started to fly after casting a wind release technique. Wind had always been the element that he had had the most talent in. Flying was something that very few shinobi back in his homeworld had been capable of, but it was nothing extraordinary for him after almost a century. As the two of them flew together above the city, he said, "These are the people you're fighting for. Do you see now? People's hearts are changed like the weather. They love you today and tomorrow they'll lynch you in the streets. Why even bother trying to be a hero?" But when he saw the expression on her face, he stopped himself from continuing. He realized that at that moment, the last thing Diana needed was more nagging from him. His words were like pouring salt on an open wound. "I'm sorry, that was uncalled for." Diana bit her lower lip and avoided meeting his eyes, speeding a bit ahead in front of him. In her heart, however, her thoughts were not much different than what he said. "I dedicated so much time and effort fighting crime. Everything I did was to keep everyone safe. Yet they..." Before meeting Naruto, Wonder Woman had not even had a social life at all. Spending from 10 to 20 hours either on guard at the watchtower or actively fighting against regular and metahuman criminals alike was a daily occurrence. As people who did not have a civilian identity at first and no other friends outside the Justice League, Martian Manhunter and Wonder Woman were the ones that had spent the highest amount of time on duty. As for killing Maxwell Lord, she was not a bloodthirsty person. On the contrary, she had a very kind and pure soul. But the Amazon princess was not blinded by her kindness. She knew what was truly important and where to draw the line. Under the effects of the lasso of truth, Maxwell Lord was compelled to speak the truth that he was never going to let go of Superman, and that the only way for Superman to regain his mental faculties was for Maxwell to die. Because of that, Wonder Woman killed him. It was for the sake of countless innocent people that could have suffered or even died at the hands of the mind-controlled Kryptonian. I can see where the average population is coming from. They are afraid of me, of my power. They hate metahumans. I can understand their reaction because fear makes people irrational. But Superman, Batman, John and the others, how could they not understand why I did it? Why did everyone turn their back on me? Wonder Woman was momentarily distracted from her thoughts when a loud beeping sound came from the wristwatch on Naruto's hand. He stopped in his flight and floated in the air to answer. After tapping on the screen of the watch, a small hologram was projected from it. 2 long rabbit-like ears, a cute snout, 9 fluffy tails, and the body of a tiny fox cub. It was none other than Kyuubi. "Naruto. I'm not going crazy. The fox yelled out the very moment that Naruto answered the call. Ha ha. I told you I'm not crazy. Diana looked at Naruto bewildered, and he found himself chuckling. You won't believe it if I told you. Come on, try to guess. Kyuubi continued to shout, filled with enthusiasm. Yours truly is becoming a god. Waha. Naruto rolled his eyes. You're definitely going crazy. No, I'm serious. Dr. Fate said so. Apparently, those people that started worshipping me in the Vega system are the cause of this. Now, all I need to do is kill a god. Didn't that new Genesis helmet dude offer us an assassination bounty already? You mean Orion? Yes, him. We can kill Darkseid for his bounty, and get myself a godhood too. 2 birds, 1 stone. What do you say? Naruto and Diana looked at each other. What are the chances? She asked him with no small amount of surprise. Turning towards Kyuubi's hologram, Naruto said. About that, we might have to kill another god first. What did I miss? It's a long story, wouldn't know from where to start. Let's meet up and talk. Where are you now? In our ship, still outside Dr. Fate's tower. I haven't taken off yet, I called you first. Alright, wait for us there. Diana and I are on our way, flying. We should be there in a few minutes. We'll talk more face to face. After that, he terminated the transmission. Turning towards Wonder Woman, he said with a grin. Race you there? Diana raised an eyebrow and smiled wryly at him. What do I get if I win? She asked. Oh, confident, aren't we? Well, what do you want? With a hand under her elbow and a finger to her chin, she made a thinking posture. If I win, you're going to teach me some of your skills. Especially the transformation spell, or the way you're storing things in a scroll. Naruto looked at her weirdly. Interpreting his expression as him being reluctant about it, she added quickly. Never mind, if it's too much to ask, let me think of something else. Dummy, why wouldn't I want to teach you? He said and pinched her nose, making her slap his hand away in annoyance. He chuckled at her. I'm not holding my skills secret or anything like that. I just never thought you'd be interested. I mean, you're already a fantastic fighter, you can fly, and you're a demigoddess too. A smile made its way on her face when he complimented her fighting skills. Come to think of it, we've never sparred against each other, have we? She said. We haven't done any missions together either. He also said. It would be so fun to do bounties together with you and Kurama. Anyway, we're going off topic. You don't need to win a wager for me to teach you my jutsu. All you had to do is just ask. Think of something I wouldn't normally agree with, you can make use of this chance and force me to do it. But I wouldn't want to force you to do something you don't like. She said and trailed off. Sheesh, you're no fun. He complained in annoyance. Well, sorry for not being fun. I'm sorry, I'm such a boring person. She said, annoyed too. But their annoyance was all a pretense. Only a few moments later, they started grinning at each other. If I win, you're washing the dishes and taking out the garbage for a month. Naruto said. Hey, aren't the stakes a bit too high? She asked, for the first time showing some hesitation. Doing housework was something that she did not enjoy, to say the least. Well, you can back off if you don't dare. He said snidely. What did you say? She narrowed her eyes at him. She knew it was a petty provocation, but her competitive nature could not simply ignore it. You hurt me. He said unrepentantly. If I win, you're going to tell me the most embarrassing moment in your life, while you're tied with my lasso of truth. Naruto suddenly became pale in the face. At the front of his mind, a memory that he had tried to bury for over a century had suddenly resurfaced. The memory of losing his first kiss to a black-haired boy at the academy. He was not going to tell her that, over his dead body. Did I strike a nerve? Diana asked, the corners of her lips raising in a grin. She even started to laugh. I can't wait for it, ha ha. By the way, just for the record, earlier this morning, it took me only a few minutes to fly from Chile to Switzerland. That's over 7,000 miles, baby. There are less than 200 miles from where we are now to Salem. Now, you do the math, how long will it take me to get there? At her words, his eyes became serious and his body was suddenly enveloped in a very bright cloak of red and yellow light. Despite the risk of getting ill if he absorbed too much natural energy, he even entered his six-path sage mode at the same time, and a truth-seeking orb appeared behind his back. He was not taking any chances. I can't wait to see you wearing an apron and washing the dishes like an obedient housewife. A tick mark appeared on her temple at his words. And I can't wait to see what you're hiding. It's got to be something very juicy if it got you to be that serious. Eyes filled with fighting spirit, they glared daggers at each other. After getting in a line, he said. All right, counting together from 3 to 1 and starting at go. Ready? Ready. Then, they started counting at the same time. 3, 2, 1, go. A deafening explosion boomed as if the sky ruptured. Wonder Woman exploded forth with such speed that she left sonic booms in her wake, clearing the sky of clouds in her surroundings. But Naruto did not fall behind her at all. The truth-seeking orb at his back instantly transformed into an enormous slingshot. Not only that, he also broke the sound barrier when the slingshot launched him, but he even overtook Wonder Woman too despite her already insane speed. However, just as he was about to grin in satisfaction and relief, he was suddenly thrown off his course when she blitzed past him almost like a hurricane. As hard as it was for him to imagine, Wonder Woman's speed all of a sudden increased to almost double from before. Fuck. It was at that moment that Naruto knew he was fucked. No. I can't lose this. I won't lose this. No matter what. His mind set, he formed a one-handed ram seal. In the next moment, his body vanished, leaving behind only a few arcs of yellow and red light. He teleported. You cheater. Wonder Woman's loud yell made a whole flock of birds scatter and fly in panic from the woods surrounding Dr. Fate's tower. I didn't know you were such a sore loser. He said with a grin. I thought warriors are proud people that know how to take a loss with dignity. I didn't lose. You teleported. You cheated. She shouted incensed. How so? I said we'll race, but I never said we're only doing it by flying. Flying. You just assumed that. You. A ninja must see underneath the underneath. That's the first lesson that my first sensei taught me after I graduated from the academy. Diana's cheeks were red and her entire face was flushed from anger. If she had lost fair and square, she would have not said a thing. But she could not accept the result in the current situation. You tricked me. You're a scumbag, Naruto. Ego, don't praise me like that or I'll get a big head. Ninjas are masters of deception, didn't you know that? Hee hee. When I was a kid dash. Naruto abruptly stopped his gloating when the sound of a sharp sword leaving its sheath reached his ears. But when Diana lunged at him, a cloud of smoke unexpectedly filled her entire line of sight. When the curtain of smoke finally dispersed, there was only a piece of log instead of Naruto. If that was not enough to infuriate her, there was even a smiley face with its tongue stuck out that had been carved in the bark of the log. It was so ridiculous that the princess found herself bursting into laughter. All her annoyance melted at that moment. He appeared behind her with a body flicker movement and embraced her from behind, his hands resting on her tummy. Feeling better yet? He asked and kissed on the cheek. You jerk. She said petulantly but leaned back into his embrace like a spoiled child. She realized that their little race and his shenanigans had been just a way for him to distract her from her worries and relieve her stress. And it worked. Although only for a moment, she had forgotten about the tens of thousands of people protesting against her in New York City, or that the ones she used to think of as her dear friends hated her guts now. She felt better now. My goddess, how I love this man, she thought. But don't forget that you lost. You still have to wash the dishes for 1 month. I'll make sure to take photos. He piped up. I take that back, I hate this man. Chapter 35 War. How convenient. Our javelins don't have AIs. Wonder Woman said. Man, woman and fox, the three of them were aboard Naruto's ship. The Amazon was seated in the pilot's seat, piloting it. After reaching a high enough altitude, she followed Naruto's suggestion to input the coordinates of Paradise Island. Following that, the AI took control of the ship and drove it by itself. Therefore, while she was technically the pilot, in reality, she did not have to do anything after setting the course. Does the Justice League even use spaceships anymore? He asked her, knowing about the changes that the Watchtower had undergone after the Justice League's massive expansion. Most of us use the teleporter to travel from the Watchtower to Earth and vice versa, but javelins are still used frequently because quite a few members don't like the feeling of being teleported. As Green Arrow would put it, he doesn't like someone playing pinball with his molecules. Those like him prefer to use a spaceship instead, she said and giggled. Speaking of, he's the only one who stood up for you, isn't he? Didn't know you two were that close. Diana threw him an amused sidelong glance. Are you perhaps jealous? Naruto chuckled. I'm just wondering how come that, out of dozens of metahumans, nobody dared to stand up for you. Instead, it was only a regular dude with no powers, just wielding a bow, that had the courage to defend you against Superman and the big guns of the Justice League, so to speak. If anything, I admire him. I've always respected people of character like him. The princess was silent for a few moments, thinking about Green Arrow. I was surprised too that he stood up for me when even someone like John took Superman's and Batman's side, condemning my actions. We aren't that close, we've only interacted a few times, and we rarely go on any patrols together. All I know about him is that he was one of the very few that took effort to recruit into the Justice League. At first, he refused our offer directly, with no hesitation. His reason was that big organizations like the Justice League tend to forget about the little guy, and that he'd rather protect the ordinary people instead of saving the world on a large scale. He wanted to take care of his city first and foremost. How did you convince him to join in the end? He asked in interest. She showed a hint of distaste on her face when she spoke next. Batman made use of Black Canary to manipulate him. Black Canary's name did not light any bulbs in his head because she was not a particularly famous hero. There were over 100 other members of her tier in the Justice League. Naruto did not care to remember them all. He only knew a dozen or two of them by name. Seeing that he did not know who she was talking about, she explained. Her ability is to release sonic screams. She's a good fighter too. But most importantly, she's a very attractive woman. Blonde-haired, blue-eyed, often wearing a costume with sexy fishnet stockings. Green Arrow fell for her at first sight. Looks like no matter the planet, men of character often have a weakness for beautiful women. He chuckled. In the momentary silence that followed, a sound of purring and a low, quiet growl could be heard clearly. It was coming from the nine-tailed fox cub that was sprawled like a lazy cat in Wonder Woman's lap. It looked like QB had forgotten all about his sky-high pride and dignity as the most powerful bijou. Every time the Amazon princess petted his head and caressed his back, the fierce and violent-tailed beast would become putty in her hands. Diana grabbed a bunch of his fluffy tails and pulled at them playfully, not able to resist the urge to tease the fox a little, but he did not seem to mind at all. If anything, his growls of comfort grew louder. In moments like that, it was very hard for her to wrap her mind around the idea that the cute fox cub purring like a small engine in her lap could become a murder machine in the next second if needed. The The old leader of my country and my homeworld and my mentor both were big perverts. Naruto continued. Kyuubi lazily opened his eyes and his snide words suddenly put Naruto on edge. And you're a bigger pervert than them both. A closet pervert. The princess began to smile widely, realizing that she was about to hear some juicy bits about Naruto's dark history from when he was young. Kurama. Naruto called his name in warning, but the fox revealed an evil grin. What? You forgot about the first technique you've created? Turning towards Wonder Woman, he told her, other great ninja and the previous Kages created powerful cloning techniques, spheres of destruction, teleportation spells and so on. But do you know what he created? A sexy jutsu. Wahahaha. Naruto's face looked like he had just seen a ghost. He became even paler, if that was possible, when Diana said in a very sweet voice. Oh, a sexy technique? I wonder what was that all about? The nine-tailed demon fox made a large toothy grin, filled with malice, worthy of his name. You have no idea how much time and effort this idiot put into creating that technique. He spent years reading porn magazines and peeping on women in bathhouses as a kid to perfect it. Naruto suddenly lunged at Kyuubi, but Wonder Woman intercepted his hands, protecting the fox in her lap. At that moment, Kyuubi raised his nose in the air and sniffed in provocation at him. The look he gave to Naruto was just like that of a kid who escaped from getting an ass-whooping from his parents by running into his grandma's arms. I did it as a prank at first, to prank the academy instructor that used to pick on me for being a problem kid. That's all, I swear. From behind Diana's protective arms, still lying comfortably in her lap, Kyuubi chuckled and said, Then why did you continue doing it after that too? Naruto's face was steaming. Diana had such a huge grin on her face that she almost resembled the Joker at that moment. She could not get enough of seeing his mortified with shame face. Because it worked against strong opponents. Shinobi were often perverted, especially those stronger than me. Iruka, Ebisu, Sandaime, Jiraiya. Hell, even the rabbit goddess fell prey to my reverse harem sexy technique. He sputtered self-righteously. At this point, Diana burst into a fit of uncontrollable giggles. But Naruto was not laughing. Not one bit. One more word and you're dead. That was what his eyes seemed to convey as he glared at Kyuubi. His expression looked fierce, like he was going to eat him alive if he said another word. You have so many funny moments from when you were a kid, so many memories. I envy you. Wonder Woman said, still giggling. Kyuubi stretched his tiny limbs and let out a cute yawn that sounded more like a yelp. Then, he hopped on Diana's shoulder, his eyes filled with schadenfreude. You don't know half of it. Let me tell you more of his embarrassing moments. You don't need to beat his scummy ass in a race. You have me. Naruto's eyes widened in panic. Kurama, don't you fucking dare. But the fox continued speaking, completely ignoring his threats and looking giddy at the thought that he was finally getting revenge on Naruto for how many times he had gotten his ass kicked by the blonde in the past. Oh my. I don't know from where to start. There are so many. Wee hee hee. Kyuubi giggled weirdly in perverse glee. Let's see, maybe the way he won his first fight in his first Chunin exams, by farting? Ha ha ha. Or maybe the 1,000 years of death technique. Waha, that shit's so funny no matter how many times I think about it. No, maybe when he transformed into his Uchiha teammate and tried to steal a kiss from his crush, but his diarrhea gave out his disguise? Oh wait, maybe I should tell you who's the one he had his first kiss with. Kurama. Naruto hollered and a lightning blade burst from his palm and pierced right at the fox. The fox jumped away from Wonder Woman's shoulder, laughing out loud in glee and easily dodging the lightning blade. However, while he was still in midair, he was abruptly yanked and smacked down onto the floor of the ship. What the hell? The fox cussed in surprise, not noticing at first the invisible chakra threads that had extended from Naruto's fingers and connected to various parts of his body. If he had not been so busy laughing out loud, he might have noticed the chakra threads when they hooked onto him. But now, it was too late. Now, it was Naruto's turn to laugh evilly as he dragged the fox on the floor to him by pulling on the chakra strings. "Diana! Help!" he cried out pitifully. But the princess's indifferent laughter sealed his fate. You traitor! I trusted you to protect me," the fox yelled at the Amazon. Naruto chuckled in anticipation. "You reap what you sow. What goes around, comes around." Kyuubi's eyes revealed fear. "No. Wait. Naruto, can't we talk?" "Ahaha, I was joking." "It was a joke." No. Gaia. The fox's screams filled the spaceship as Naruto administrated him a long overdue and well-deserved beating. While Naruto, Kyuubi and Wonder Woman were flying over the Atlantic Ocean, heading towards Themyscira, the doorbell rang at Wonder Woman's apartment back in New York. "I think they are not at home," the one pressing the button to ring the doorbell said. It was a rather short girl with shoulder-length blonde hair and bright blue eyes. "Or maybe they're doing something and can't answer the door," the girl next to her said. She could not be any more different. She was tall and athletic, her hair was red and almost reached her waist, her eyes were green, and her skin had a faint golden hue. "I've been ringing the bell for 3 minutes already." "What could be so important?" the blonde said. "Maybe they don't want to answer? Or maybe, the redhead said and wiggled her eyebrows at her friend suggestively. "Honestly, why you always gotta make jokes about that?" the blonde rebuked her. The redhead raised her hands as to defend herself. "I'm just saying. They are a couple and they're living together. Isn't that normal between lovers?" The blonde huffed and rolled her eyes. "At least use your super hearing to make sure whether they're at home or not," the redhead said. "But what if they're really, doing it?" the blonde said, her cheeks becoming a bit red. The redhead also flushed a little. "Come on, Kara, just do it." Eventually, the blonde steeled her resolve and used her super hearing. But after a few moments, her shoulders dropped. There's nobody at home. If she focused intensely on her super hearing, she could even hear someone's whispers from half a mile away. That was how she could be sure that the apartment really was empty. With bummed-out faces, the two girls, Supergirl and Starfire, headed to the elevator dejected. The purpose of their visit was to see how Wonder Woman was feeling after the way the rest of the Justice League treated her earlier that morning during the meeting. In truth, Supergirl had no hard feelings against Wonder Woman's actions, and even agreed with her decision secretly. But she could not outrightly defy Superman in front of everyone. Wonder Woman was not wrong. But Clark and Batman and the rest of the League aren't wrong either. This whole situation is one big mess. There is no right answer. As for Starfire, she was completely on Wonder Woman's side. She had wanted to speak out in her defense too, alongside Green Arrow, but Supergirl had stopped her. Starfire was just a newly arrived alien on Earth, a teenage girl, and not a full-fledged member of the Justice League either. She had been on Earth for only a few months. Her words would not hold any weight in the eyes of the rest of the members. Supergirl had stopped her from making a scene because in those sensitive times, not only Starfire's action would not change anything for good, she would also needlessly make her life harder. "Look at me, being all mature and all that," she thought, half amused, half mocking herself. After Naruto saved her from her cryosleep on Argo and brought her to Earth, Supergirl lived her days on Earth happy to have a second chance at a new life. Light-hearted and always up to some mischief, she just enjoyed high school, hanging out with her friends, and occasionally beating up bad guys. She was letting her adopted cousin, Superman, deal with the serious stuff. However, after the addition of Starfire in her life, the ditzy blonde involuntarily became more mature in order to take care of the redhead who was an even bigger airhead than she was. But Supergirl did not regret it, nor was she annoyed or frustrated, because, before she knew it, the Tamaranian princess had become her best friend, almost like a sister. No, even more than that. I really wanted to see Diana and tell her that I don't hate her like everyone else. She must be feeling horrible right now. Starfire said pitifully. Do you think that maybe she left the Earth? Supergirl was startled. That. I don't know. Soon, the elevator reached the ground floor, and the two teenage girls came out of the building. Down with the Justice League. Boo. Arrest all metahumans. We don't need any metahumans. Fuck the government. Down with the government. Death penalty for Wonder Woman. Hearing what the crowd was screaming, Supergirl and Starfire thought to themselves. I wouldn't blame Wonder Woman if she left the Earth after all this. The roars coming from the crowd reverberated through the entire city. Although Starfire was dressed in a long gray winter coat that covered most of her body, her height, her vibrant green eyes, and her golden skin still made her stand out. The Tamaranian princess pulled her fluffy white hat deeper and wrapped her muffler higher up her face to hide her face. Her unique and exotic looks had made her quite famous worldwide among the male population after she joined the Justice League. But with the anti-metahuman hatred having reached its peak at that moment, being recognized as a metahuman and a member of the Justice League was the last thing she wanted. The two girls hurriedly made their way to a narrow side alley to not get swept by the mob. When they reached a spot with no people or visible traffic cameras around, they flew away, quickly leaving New York City behind. The streets of the Big Apple had become pandemonium. Almost 100,000 protesters were screaming at the top of their lungs. Burning bins and destroyed police cars littered the streets as the angry mob was smashing the windows of the shops and cars, looting everything they could get their hands on. The riots were not limited to New York City. They had spread from there to the rest of the country in a matter of hours, like wildfire. Metropolis, Los Angeles, Houston, San Francisco, Chicago, Gotham, Coast City, Jump City, almost all the great cities in the United States had been frozen by protesters. Central City was the only great city in the USA where there were no riots in the streets. Central City was Flash's home city. The inhabitants of the city loved their local hero so much that they had even inaugurated a museum in his honor, to show their appreciation for him. Because of the kind and likable speedster that always did his best to protect them, Central City's population had not jumped on the hate train against metahumans like everyone else. Regardless, the situation in Central City was an anomaly compared to what was happening in the rest of the country. In Washington, D.C., the government mobilized the army to protect the White House from the protesters. In the rest of the cities in the USA, the police and the National Guard clashed against the rioters violently. Many city halls were set on fire and multiple casualties were recorded only a few hours after the start of the protests. The general population was enraged. Enraged at the metahuman criminals. Enraged at the Justice League. Enraged at the government for their tolerance towards metahuman criminals instead of executing them as they deserved. Enraged at the government also for allowing the Justice League to run amok as they pleased. All the frustration, helplessness, fear and anger that had been brewing and bottling up inside of them for years blew up violently at that moment. But the Justice League was untouchable. In the first place, nobody knew the civilian identities of the members, and it was not like they had any means of attacking the Watchtower, a satellite in space, either. However, in the eyes of the general population, the government was the root of all evils. In their minds, it was the government's fault that metahuman criminals were just imprisoned and given the chance to break out of prison and commit crimes all over again, instead of being given the death penalty. It was the government's fault for allowing an independent organization of superhumans like the Justice League to exist outside the confines of the law. It was the government's fault for allowing the metahumans to run amok. Due to the USA citizens' high level of armament and their ingrained anti-government predisposition, the riots in the USA had quickly become violent, with the protesters using fire weapons to fight against the armed forces of the government. But that did not mean that the rest of the world was left unaffected by what was happening overseas. In the next few hours, protests blew up in Europe too. In Moscow, tens of thousands of people came out in the streets and sieged Kremlin. In Athens, the already existing riots against the police forces due to a case of police brutality had turned even more violent after a metahuman policeman tried to disperse a mob of protesters through the use of his superpowers. Because of him, the number of protesters sharply increased, and the riots became a nationwide issue. In France, multiple cities became paralyzed by the protests as hundreds of thousands of people came out in the streets, while in the UK, the angry mob of protesters attacked the royal family when the monarch came out in the streets, trying to placate the masses. Soon, the rest of the continent descended into chaos too. In Asia, some governments directly ordered the army to open fire on the civilian protesters. The situation quickly escalated in brutality, even above what was happening in the USA. In China, one of the generals in the People's Liberation Army controlled by the Communist Party refused the orders of his superiors to open fire against the peaceful but numerous protesters in Beijing and sided with the population instead. Because of that, the enormous country was engulfed by the flames of revolution. In that chaos, Hong Kong broke off from the rest of the country, and the waves created by the civil unrest in China greatly affected North Korea too. In the following days, the North Korean leader was lynched by the population alongside his entourage of politicians and the ruling political party. The North Korean government fell. In India, the initial protests against the metahumans and the Justice League immediately devolved into something much worse, a violent clash between people belonging to different religions. The initial reason for protests was forgotten and the protests became something entirely different when the already existing conflicts amidst the population reared their fangs. In Myanmar, the military opened fire on the protesters, and then the army overthrew the government too, installing a regime of stratocracy. Under martial law, hundreds of civilians were murdered in the process. In Thailand, the already existing movement against the monarchy intensified and blew up into an all-out revolution. Compared to most of the world, the situation in Japan was vastly different because the anti-metahuman movement over there was almost non-existent. In the first place, the percentage of metahumans in the total population was noticeably higher in Japan compared to other countries, a fact which had led the sociologists of Japan more than a decade ago to predict the possibility of major civic unrest to occur in the future, as it was the case for the rest of the world now. Because of that, years back, the government had taken timely measures. The hero agencies and the superhero academy that they had created years ago had fully integrated the metahuman population into the society and the economy of the country. In Japan, metahumans could use their gifts properly as working members of society, instead of being tempted to join the wrong side of the law. Naturally, superpowered criminals still existed, but the percentage was much smaller than in the rest of the world. There was no dichotomy between metahumans and regular humans. In the current Japanese society, metahumans and regular humans were like the cogs of a machine, both necessary for it to function. 1. As for Africa, several countries had already been in the midst of riots or civil wars for various other reasons. In the light of the current events, the United Nations could no longer afford to pay attention to the African countries that were in turmoil anymore. The rebel forces, the revolutionary movements, the crime lords and the anarchists on the continent did not miss the chance. Senegal's capital, Dakar, was like a battlefield between the protesters and the armed police forces. The rebel forces from the Central African Republic overthrew the government under the leadership of several metahumans. In Mozambique, the armed rebel forces launched a siege on the capital city, and the population started an exodus en masse towards the south, desperately running away to escape the war. Just like the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand had been the pretext that sparked the start of World War I several decades ago, Wonder Woman's murder of Maxwell Lord sparked a wave of chaos and war as the Earth had never seen before. This time, it was different from World War I when there were clear alliances and enemies. This time, there were no enemy countries fighting against each other. Now, it was a different kind of war, it was hatred and discord from within. In less than a week, chaos engulfed the entire world. The way the social unrest and conflict and war had spread from one country to another could be attributed to mass media and the internet. However, for the people who had clear minds and clear eyes to see, the speed at which it had happened was not normal. Never before had a country's civil war had impacted the whole world like that. Never before had such a state of chaos and strife overtaken the planet so fast. It was too sudden. It was too fast. It was unnatural. That's it for this reading. Hit like and subscribe for a free ticket pass going to the different worlds of anime fanfictions. Looking forward to having you on board again.